Spain, and thanks for joining us for another episode of Mid-American Gardener. And as you can see, we are out on the road. This time, we're in Kankakee County at panelist Chuck Voigt's family farm. And during this episode, we're going to talk about his late planting of zucchini. He's going to show us the right way to dig potatoes and how to get the most out of your asparagus patch. So let's go find Chuck and get started. Okay, so Chuck, we're here now in your garden. Now, when most people think about planting, they think about doing it in the spring.
Sure.
But we're going to learn now that you can get that harvest later on in the fall with some crops, not everything.
Right.
So what do you have growing here, and when will you be able to enjoy it?
Okay. Well, I have some zucchini that are just now coming up. It's a little late, but
Not too late.
It's not too late. I think by early to mid-September they should be doing their thing. It's two varieties. One called Butter that I've talked about on the show. It's a golden zucchini, which produces like crazy. Has a little more intense flavor, I think. And then I did two hills of just a standard black zucchini. And then some cucumbers are coming as well. They all come pretty quickly, especially in the hot part of the season like this. So. The nice thing about zucchini now is vine borer stops flying in July, so they're gonna come up and they're gonna live until they get powdery mildew or until they get frosted or whatever. They're not gonna flop over and wilt like they do.
So you eliminate one threat.
Yes.
By doing a later planting. Now, is this something that you do every year so that you can have those crops to go into the fall, or was this a whoopsie?
It's a bit of a whoopsie. I would have liked to have gotten them in like around the 4th of July. But conditions were just not conducive to it at that point. It was hot. It was dry. Everything else was getting out of control, and it just wasn't going to happen. So
fighting the weeds and the weather, and because we had a pretty rainy early summer.
Well, it was strange. We didn't get that monsoon we've been getting in May and in early June, but then at the end of June we just started having lots of rainy weather, which here in Kankakee County. Didn't translate into lots and lots of rain, just lots and lots of rainy weather when it was too wet to do anything, but not storing up a lot of moisture.
Gotcha. So when do you think you'll be, will you be budding right up to the frost with these, do you think?
Probably yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I would say it might not take 6 weeks. So by maybe the week after Labor Day, and then until whenever frost comes. Which hopefully will be in October this year, not late September.
Gotcha.
So,
okay. And everybody knows that you love root veggies. You're the root veggie guy. So what else do you have growing?
Well, you talked about that, that burst of spring enthusiasm.
Yes.
And well, there are winter radishes, and I've shown the watermelon radish on the show. We cut open its price. Well, they only grow well in the fall. Because you put in the spring, they just bloom and don't do anything. So we've got those going here as well, along with rutabagas and gill feather turnips, which is a cross between a rutabaga and a turnip. And so there again, I would normally like to get those in July, but it just wasn't happening. So they're in now. They're coming up, which is good. I don't know about the first one here. The second one, I'm going to have to thin, because if you want a rutabaga that's 4 inches in diameter, you kind of need the plants to be 4 inches apart. But you can never count on every seed, so...
so you'll go back through and thin these once they get a little taller?
I'll get my little stool and sit down there and choose who lives and who dies, which is sad, but has to happen. But yeah, I've got... the watermelon radish made me crazy, so I've got 4 more winter radishes. Now I've got a purple daikon, I've got a regular daikon, I've got round black Spanish, and China rose.
And you've got potatoes here that are ready, and we're going to dig some of these up, right?
I think so.
Okay, now what variety of potato do we have?
This one is one that's new. It's called Lehigh.
Lehigh, okay.
Another one of those internet things. Unfortunately, when I was shopping for potatoes in January, some of the really more colorful ones were sold out because gardening was, the pandemic gardening has really made things go crazy. So this is, I believe, a white, and I've never grown it before.
So now you got to tell us the proper technique So
Okay.
walk us through how Chuck harvests potatoes.
My favorite for this is just a round point shovel.
Okay.
I like this one because it's got a really tight tang on it. This is one that I bought in Montreal at a street sale. I think it was 2 other broken shovels in this for $0.25.
Hey, you
It
can't
had
beat
a
it.
little notch out of it, so I had to round off the tip. But this has been, you can see by the shine on it, my favorite. And the other thing is, when you're digging things, probably 50% a shovel like this is a cutting tool. Maybe 40% it's a soil lifting tool. And you don't want to be more than about 10% lever, because that's when handles get broken. Because I've seen people trying to dig shrubs and trees, and they're just prying on them, and
Snap.
yeah, it's not a good thing.
So do you go out really wide, or
Well,
where do you?
since I don't know this one,
Okay.
I would probably stay back a little more, but they're held up really nicely, because every time I cultivated them, I pulled soil up over them, which keeps them from, when the soil cracks, it keeps them from getting sunburned. And most varieties that I deal with don't travel too far.
Okay.
Red Pontiac, which is the taller one down there, probably travel the most of anything that I grow regularly. So I'm usually more careful with those. I might stay way back and have to go in a couple of times. But with most things like this, I start out with the blade of the shovel, not the handle, straight up and down, about the distance back I think it needs to be. Go in maybe half of the way, so you're past any potatoes that are in the vicinity. Lean back and kind of work it
Underneath.
underneath, kind of lift
Oh, I see one.
and shake. And if they have a little bit of green in them, they'll sometimes hang on. These are past that apparently. There's the mother kind of rotted in place.
Pretty. These are gorgeous. Good looking.
Yeah, we have sandy loam soil up here as opposed to the clay loams down in Champaign. And so they really get a nice finish on the skins.
Now, what would you do with these? What would you cook? How would you cook these? Stew?
They would probably bake. The idea that a russet potato is the only kind that you can bake is crazy.
And these are white, right? These are white inside?
I think so. I'd have to look. They might be yellow inside, but I don't think so. Okay, and so when you get those original ones out of the way, then you kind of lift that. And then because we didn't get over to that side too well, I think that might be everything. Oh, there it is.
There's more.
There it is.
I'll be the assistant.
That's the spirit. My sister won't get jealous. I
was
promise.
going to say.
So that's what you do, and then you kind of close it up so that those clods don't dry out that way.
And there you go.
There you go.
From one plant.
And then
Got
as my grandpa always said,
Oh.
if you have time to use a shovel, you have time to clean the shovel.
Now, you do that before each dig?
No, just when I'm done. I don't leave it on.
I was going to say, wow, you're diligent.
Because it doesn't take much left on before you get a discoloration like that.
Gotcha. Now, the taller ones, are those ready as well?
Yes.
Can we check out check out the other variety? Will it be a different color?
Yes, they're
Okay.
red.
Let's check those out.
These I've grown for years and years. Back when I was a 4-H gardener, Irish Cobbler and Red Pontiac were the two that were most readily available. So last year I planted them on Easter weekend, which they always say you plant them on Good Friday. And Easter wasn't that early last year, so it seemed like a good idea. Well, they came up and were robust little plants. They got frozen in May.
Oh.
They started to come back, and they got frozen again. And so I had the most dismal little marbles of potatoes last year. That's why I went to 3 rows this year, because I had something to prove.
Mother Nature was not going to get the last laugh.
Well, I planted them later, and it was great. And still, as they were coming up, right at the end of May, there was one night when it almost frosted. And it was like, what does a guy got to do? So anyway, here we are, Red Pontiac. With reds, you do want to get them while they're not over mature, because the color starts to fade if when they're in the soil too long.
Okay. There they are.
There.
Oh, check
And
that out. That came out
Those are hanging
perfect.
out on better because it's a little less mature.
I would throw those in a crock pot with a roast, and that's dinner.
Yeah, we have.
Beautiful. But the main thing is just staying back with the shovel so that you don't slice the potatoes or nick them.
And being willing to have to go in twice rather than chopping through a bunch of them, because that's demoralizing when you pull the shovel out and there's one stuck on the side of the shovel.
Good looking taters.
Yes, and because they were in fairly late, and because it got hot so early, I think that kept the size down a bit. Because with vines this big, I would expect potatoes like a pound, and that's just not happening on any of these. But that's a pretty good yield from one little seed potato.
Now you talked about your asparagus,
Yes.
and I liked that because you said there's something that you would do a little different next time. And so we always love when the experts learn something, because then they can teach us, and we don't have to make those same mistakes.
For years on the show, and in the book that I wrote, I said there's no need to buy 2-year-old asparagus crowns when you're going to start a new patch, because the transplanting shock just holds them back. Well, this year, in my online travels, I was tempted by a group deal. 10 of these and 10 of these, both predominantly male, which is good because they don't waste energy on seeds. 2 varieties that I'd heard of, and 10 of each for a bargain price. Well, that was fine until they came and we were getting ready to plant them, and they were the tiniest little things that I've ever seen. And the reason I thought 1-year-old was plenty was because the other time when I started a new asparagus bed, I grew my own. I grew them in a row for a year, kept them weeded, and they got up to be nice asparagus plants. I dug them up, and they had roots probably like that. And so in my mind, why do you need to let them grow for 2 years? Well, because
You found out the hard way.
especially on special deals, apparently the nurseries sort out the tiniest things they can find and give them to you that way. So
Okay, let's go check them out. Okay, so in addition to that advice, you said there was something you would change with just how you planted.
well, yeah, when I saw these tiny little crowns, as most times happen in my life these days, I was in a hurry. And so it occurred to me, why am I digging a solid trench to put these every 18 inches when I could just dig individual holes 18 inches apart, especially since they're not very big. So that's what I did. And then I just filled up a little bit over them because you don't want to smother them. And then as the season has gone along, yesterday I pulled it in and they're just about back to grade level. So
Now, what is the benefit of doing the trench versus the hole?
you just don't have to move as much dirt,
Gotcha.
soil. And
It's easier on the gardener to do it that way.
yes, after my second back surgery, I decided that less is better, at least some of the time.
Good advice. Good
So-
advice. Now, when will you actually be able to enjoy these? Next year, or do you think the
Not
year
next
after?
year, and depending on how they grow next year, we'll see about harvesting just a very few the next year. But by the 3rd year, you should start to be in at least like a half production mode, and then over the next couple of years get up to full production.
And even though they were skimpy, you said you had a pretty good survival rate. So
I lost.
they'll get there.
I lost one of each kind,
Uh-huh.
and so it may take me an extra season to get up to full production, but hopefully we all survive this pandemic, and I can enjoy asparagus 4 or 5 years down the road.
Okay, let's go check out the sweet potatoes. Is that where we're going next?
That'll work.
Okay.
That'll work. We can look at the rhubarb on the way
Oh,
by.
yes.
I really like the red stemmed ones, although these are fading a bit at this point. So same company as I got these from. I got this one is Canada Red, and this one is Crimson something or other. And so I got one each of those two, figuring that if they do well in a couple of years, I can dig them up and divide them and have more.
That's the.
But they have the really bright red petioles, so when you cook it up, it has kind of a pink color, as opposed to when they're green, it gets kind of a grayish green. which, although I don't really like rhubarb, it looks really bad. So anyway, they've done well. This one was probably a little bit better division. It had some small roots. This one was just a big slice taken off a big root with a bud on it. And so this one has done better than that one, but hopefully next year they're going to come up and go crazy. And I would suspect, as well as that's rooted in, we can probably harvest a limited amount next year on the rhubarb. You know, you grow it for a year, start cautiously the second year, and by the third year you can probably be up to normal. So rhubarb comes faster than asparagus.
Gotcha. You're in it for the long game. And I always like when you can, when you take care of them or they do well, and then you can divide, because that saves you money in the long run. And if you get a really healthy plant, then you can eat on that for years to come.
Yep.
So, okay, let's go check out the sweet potatoes. Okay, so these vines are looking really good. When did you put these in? These are your sweet potatoes, I forgot to mention. So when did you put these in?
I think it was still in June. I waited a little too long to try to start them, but these first 6 were sprouted over the winter and came pretty quickly. So I got them out here 6-8 weeks ago. And if it wasn't so dry, they would probably be spread out even more. We plant them on a ridge, partly because it makes them easier to dig, also because it keeps the soil temperature nice and warm and they feel like they're back home in the tropics. So we have Korean purple there at the end, Ibis white cream, a white rooted one, and then this is red yam, which is kind of what you think of as a traditional, like a Beauregard with reddish skin and orange flesh. And
now, why do you build these up on a mound and not like the other potatoes in the other bed?
Because the other potatoes, you hill them up, but you hill them up after they're planted. You pull soil up around them to try to keep the soil cool. I mound this up before I plant them, so it gets warmed up. It's the same reason I used to put black plastic over it, which really makes them grow, but which also really attracts voles. Because they've got a protected environment, the foxes can't see them. They've got a wonderful food source. That's really, really demoralizing when you see what was a 2-pound sweet potato that's just appealing.
And when will you be able to harvest these? Because everything, the foliage,
I try to get them out before it gets real frosty. So the end of September, early October usually. Because if they sit in cold soil for any length of time, they don't keep very well.
Gotcha. And will these lose? Will the foliage die back? Is that how you know when to harvest?
No.
Okay.
No, usually, often it'll be that they'll get touched with frost. And at that point, there's some thought that some bitter principle migrates out of the leaves into the roots. And once they get frosted, I try to get them cut off so that they can't do that. And so once they're cut off, you kind of need to get them dug.
Get them dug out, okay.
Just about the mound, I use the rototiller and get it softened up really nicely. And then I take this big landscape rake and pull the soil up from both sides. And this is nice because it takes a much bigger bite than the standard garden rake, which you could also use, but you'd have to do probably half again as many strokes, which gets a little wearing on the thing. And then leaf rake, if you know a leaf rake, is not really good for moving soil. It's good for picking up leaves without digging into the grass or whatever.
Earlier this spring, we did a segment where we talked about soft neck versus hard neck garlic, and this is right up your alley. And so Chuck's going to tell us how to know the difference, and then we're going to talk about planting them, harvesting them, and just how to get the best bang for your buck. So first of all, what is the difference? How do you tell the difference?
Well, the thinking is that the hard necks are more primitive. Because if you've grown flowering alliums, the onion family things, they get these ball-like flowers on the top of a tall scape. Well, hardneck garlics do that same thing, and instead of really mature flowers, they make these little bulbils. And we try to get those cut off because it puts more energy into the real bulb. But sometimes, especially smaller ones, they come out later. And so they get missed because we make My sister pickles the tender young garlic scapes, and you can stir fry them and do all sorts of fun things with them. You can also take the little bulbs.
I was just going to ask.
You can plant those. You could plant them thickly, and then in the early spring when they're coming up, you can harvest those as green garlic, which chefs would kill for because it is so it's kind of a mild, sweet garlic flavor.
So these do not flower, just to be clear.
There are some like undeveloped flowers, and some people at Wisconsin have done some tissue culture work where they've actually matured the flowers and made true garlic seed, but it's a pretty time-consuming.
Gotcha.
And ideally, they'd be able to develop new garlic cultivars because, as it is, we kind of wait on spot mutations or something to change it because it's just constantly vegetatively repopulating it from the same stock. But
gotcha.
This is a soft neck. Does not have a scape like that, so it just bends over when it's ready to go. These are the kind that you would normally use to braid because it's like braiding Tinker Toys to do those with escapes in them. Now, as far as planting, you would break up the bulb and take probably the largest cloves work better because the larger the clove, usually the larger the bulb it will make. Take those apart, maybe starting late September, but in my mind the ideal time to put it in is October 1 through October 15.
Okay.
In most of mid-America. You know, you could probably go a little later as you go south, and you probably need to go a little earlier as you go north. But
so you harvested these how long ago?
I harvested these a little 3+ weeks ago, and
and you'll just let them sit like this until October, or do you break them apart sooner?
You let them cure for about a month,
okay.
And I leave the roots on it because it helps wick moisture away. At about this stage, in this kind of humid weather that we're sitting in today, they start reversing that procedure and sending it back into the bulbs. So this is when we would come in and just do away with the roots so that they've done their helpful thing. And at that time, you know, however you want to, if you're not going to braid it, you can go ahead and take that off. And at this point, with any luck, the papery covering will
just come right off.
The dirty part will come off if you haven't left them in the ground too long, and you'll still have a nice papery covering. And so you leave them like that. You don't put them in the refrigerator because they'll mold in the refrigerator and probably get a little bitter. But don't leave them out in the sunshine. Sometimes you cure onions out in the sunshine after they're dug. Garlic doesn't like that.
Good to know. And plant those in October and then harvest
the following, depending on variety, from about the 4th of July to the middle of July. Usually we'll get most of them. Because we're humid and we tend to have occasional rains in July, we can't let them go to full brown. We need to keep at least 3 green leaves. They die from the bottom up. Harvest them while the top leaves are still green, and that because the leaves go down and are attached to these papery coatings.
Gotcha.
And so when the leaf dies, the papery coating dies, and then pretty soon you're getting a little of that there where the papery coating starts to rot off. Also, as they come out of the ground, the water content in the bulb is high. And so that curing and drying out process develops the full flavor. Most of the gourmet types are the hardnecks.
Okay.
They tend to have more complex flavor, particularly the California white, which is most of what you see in the grocery store, is mainly just really hot without a lot of nuance.
Gotcha.
So garlic connoisseurs will...
I just learned more about garlic than I think I've ever known before.
Yeah, you go to a good garlic catalog and you think you're buying wine because they're talking about the aftertaste and where it hits you on the tongue.
And the notes and things like that.
Exactly,
awesome.
Exactly that.
All right.
So that's garlic.
So before we go, we wanted to stop at this beautiful flower patch. Chuck, tell us what we're looking at. I can smell them. I mean, it's so nice. What are these?
Well, we call them miracle lilies because that's what the person who gave them to my mother called them. Sometimes called naked ladies. And the reason for that is they grow up a big foliage in the spring. Looks like daffodil foliage on steroids.
Okay.
Then that dies back. And then long about the 1st of August, they just pop up like this and have clusters of blooms, lightly fragrant.
Yes, you can smell them. And right before we walked over here, they were full of butterflies. I think we ran them all off.
We're scaring them a
They're a
little
little
bit.
camera shy.
They'll be right back.
They will.
Species is Lycaris squamarigera. And there are other things that grow like this, but the nerines and some of those things are not hardy here in Zone 5A. So these have proved pretty hardy for me.
Will these continue to bloom until fall, or do you just get one beautiful show and then?
It's boom, and then they fade, and then the stalks kind of stand there a little while longer, and then it's over.
Awesome. No, I wanted to know, do any other, like the bees who like to nest, does anything nest in the stalks? Does anyone?
Not that I know of,
No?
but they could well be, because I'm not Phil Nixon out here with a hand lens checking that out.
I always am interested in the cycle, but anyway, they're beautiful. And thank you so much for letting us come out to your farm.
Well, you're welcome.
We were sweating it out today, but we learned a lot.
As I told you, I kind of missed my time on the air, and,
yes.
and my 2 dedicated fans have missed me.
They have missed you. So here's proof. Here's Chuck out at the farm. Thanks again for letting us come out. Thank you so much for watching, and we will see you next time.